Okay, welcome back, everybody. Here we are again for Novel Bootcamp. This is going to be the second half of our course. The first half was centered on outlining and figuring out what's going to be happening in every part of your book before you start, trying to be, that very diligent architect that's making the really clear roadmap or chapter plan.
Connor,
what?
We can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Why is that? Oh, no. How about now?
Now we can hear you.
Now you can. Okay, my bad. I was muted on Discord again. Okay, welcome back. We are here for a Novel Bootcamp. We are writing a brand new book in 90 days. This is the second part of the class. So the first one was really focused on that outlining.
So,
go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, Connor. Could you try to adjust the volume a little bit on your mic? It's still very quiet on YouTube.
It's as loud as I can make it. I don't get it. The bar is maxed out.
I think that the bar that's maxed out is the audio of your computer. So, for example, when I hear my own voice, it's really, really loud now.
Oh.
But your voice is still quiet. So I think there's a different meter for your mic and the other one for like when other people are talking in Discord. So that one may be too high and the other one a little too low.
Okay. I'm not sure if I can do this live on air. I'll turn them all up and see. Does it sound okay now? Any of them? Or is there something broken in my streaming software? Does it still sound bad?
Okay, a lot better. A lot better. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Just see.
Should I keep talking? Or?
Okay, yeah. Just see if you can turn down the one that was like the previous one that you turned up that was turning up like my voice or like other people's voice.
Okay. I don't know I don't know which one it is.
So
go ahead.
I mean, your voice is now good, but now like my voice sounds really, really loud. But in any case, maybe if you bring somebody up on stage, maybe turn their volume down a little or something. But anyway, so yeah, sorry to interrupt. Just it was hard to hear the previous video.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I think we'd have to restart our stream and like check all the settings and experiment with something if we wanted to fix that. I just don't think I can fix it right now.
No, it sounds great now. Yeah, your audio is good. Your audio sounds perfect.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that. I hope that has not been a problem for multiple videos. I hope that the last couple ones have been, at least anyone's been able to understand or hear. Where were we? New Novel Bootcamp. We are in a staged channel, meaning you do have to click that raise hand button if you want to speak aloud and be heard. We are on ScriptCamp, or WordCamp, which is part of our ScriptCamp family of servers. All these different Discord servers oriented towards learning different skills to reach your life goals. I want to just skip ahead to show some of the upcoming classes that we have, including June 16th, which is tomorrow, from 11 to 1. We are going into our normal bootcamp slot. So that's going to be our new bootcamp slot for Sundays. So there's going to be a class tomorrow. Right now it's called What Makes a Great Script, though I think I may actually change that or make a more specific title for that tomorrow. And then a logline workshop next week. That's going to be free and open to everybody. And then you can see we have a 6-week TV writing course, which takes you all the way from idea to finished draft of a new pilot. That's going to be running Fridays from 6 to 8. And then 11 to 1, that bootcamp slot, or that feature bootcamp slot will be, write a whole feature. In this slot, this is Saturdays 12 to 2. We're doing novel writing for the next 90 days. And so there will always be a class going on in the slot that's focusing on these topics that you can see here. This is the last free one in this series. We've done a bunch of free public classes up until now. You can find recordings of almost all those on YouTube, Twitch, and our other sites that we stream on. And that was all centered on outlining and figuring out that really comprehensive architecture plan, roadmap for the entire manuscript before you start. This next part is going to be focused more on actually executing the draft. Plenty of things going on every week. We have a writer's lab later today from 4 to 6 every Saturday. And tonight from 7 p.m. there is Writer's Voice. That's on WordCamp. That's our reading series. We'll be doing prose, poetry, short stories, and things like that for feedback with 2 readings a week. We also have weekly Writers Lab where you can bring your questions and topics, up to 5 pages of anything you're working on, for feedback. That's today from 4 to 6, and there's also another slot for that Fridays from 12 to 2. Plenty of new things coming out, including new classes on Codecamp next month, accessibility and UI design, and how to code Discord bots in July and August on Codecamp. We have Advanced Fiction Lab on our WordCamp server and Advanced Screenwriting on our ScriptCamp server as well. And those boot camps are always running, meaning that as soon as one concludes, then another one starts. And they change time slots from that Friday and Sunday. So they're just going to alternate back and forth, TV and features between Friday and Sunday. So plenty of stuff to do. If you haven't yet signed up, you can do that at scriptcamp.net. You get unlimited access to all of our classes and events, including everything else in this same course series. This course is currently in its last free class, so if you want to take any more of these and go all the way to the end of this really long roadmap, you can see we're going from heroes, villains, sidekicks, dialogue, conflict, subplots, character arcs, set pieces, tone and genre, plot twist, mystery, suspense, escalation, and revising and editing. All of that is upcoming in this course, so you should sign up at scriptcamp.net if that sounds interesting to you and you want to take the rest. Okay, so here's the schedule for this one. We're starting on first pages this week. And the goal from here out is to, if you are following along with the benchmarks of the course, is actually to start executing the outline that you spent the last month or 2 working out. And you're going to try to be setting your weekly word goals or daily word goals and keeping up with between 5,000 and 10,000 words a week, more or less. That's going to be about 1,000 to 2,000 words every weekday if you're just writing on weekdays. Okay, so at this point, hopefully everyone has their plot figured out and knows what it is they're going to be writing, what the genre is, who their main character is, what the obstacles are. You have a really good sense of where those act breaks will be and what that propulsive action will be that takes us from dramatic act to dramatic act. And you are just building out that really comprehensive picture of what's going to be happening in your book. You don't have to be plotting dialogue ahead of time or writing out the specific lines characters will say or anything like that, but we're figuring out the major turns and events of the story, the motivations of all your characters. Everything should be in a row basically by now. It's okay if you're not following exactly with the class structure, but that is we're moving forward with that expectation that you'll have some kind of outline to work with from here out. So let's open the floor. If anyone would like to raise a hand, tell us what it is that you are going to be writing in the class. Are you ready to start those pages, or do you have any last issues, problems, questions, or roadblocks? Feel free to raise a hand and speak up now. Or you can use the text chats. On the right-hand side of your Discord window, you can find that by mousing over the Classroom channel and clicking that small white word bubble that says Open Chats. I see a raised hand. Go ahead, Becky.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Just saying, yesterday I was trying to get help on some names of things. I decided the street, and I want your opinion, Luke quite liked it. The street, the house is 7 Copper Moon Lane in in London.
And so your outline's all ready to go?
Oh yeah, I've got chapter by chapter. I'm writing, which is why I needed to know the name, because the second chapter is the name of the house, and that's why I wanted it to be a mysterious one, because otherwise, if it's a boring one, the second chapter being named something like North Street or North Road kind of doesn't sound very interesting, does it? Whereas the second chapter being 7 Copper Moon Lane, now that sounds a bit more yeah.
It's a bit mysterious, yeah.
That's why I was wondering your opinion.
I think it sounds good.
Cool.
Copper Moon Lane. And so if your outline's all ready to go, did you have any last questions or things you weren't quite sure about?
It was mostly that, because like I say, that's literally the name of the chapter. So, because it's a, you know how in kids books, the place is as much of a character as the characters are. You know, it's like really important. So I needed like a creepy but also enchanting name for this house.
Right. Makes sense. Glad you found it.
So,
Anything else? Yeah, go ahead. Anything else you want to share?
I also found out that I'm allowed less words than I originally thought. So I'm currently going through my plan and looking what chapters I can take out, because I was planning to write 50,000 words, which is already really short for me. Most of my novels are 65,000 words, but apparently 50 is too long for a middle grade book.
Right.
I was told aim for 35 to 40,000 words, which is really hard. So wish me luck. I know it sounds weird to go, you know, oh, you get to write less words, but actually it's really difficult to write a compelling story with less words.
Right. Yeah, just less tools to use. Less moving pieces.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Every word has to matter.
Thank you so much for the updates. Who else wants to tell us where you are in your book? Is your outline ready to go? What questions or problems do you still have? Anything preventing you from starting off? Luke, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
I have, I guess most of my sketchbook filled out and pre-writing done. I haven't done scene cards, but I've done story beats sufficiently for Moons Over Make'em, and I'm about halfway through Among Dogs currently. But I'm not going to be doing much novel writing beyond just finishing up those story beats and maybe fleshing them out into scene cards. Just going to be focusing on the movie script and the pilot script for writing goals currently.
Okay, so you're working on 4 things at once?
2 things. I'm done working on this. I'm putting a pin in it here.
Oh, okay. I see. So you've come to Novel Bootcamp to tell us you are not writing a novel.
I mean, I'm not actively writing it. I'm planning on writing it in the future.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so that's totally cool. This whole course is not really going to be focused on outlining. So for anyone watching along, this would be the point where it's like you have to either pants it or you have an outline to work. I'm not even talking to Luke at this point. I'm just like telling everybody else. At this point, we're like, you got to have your outline ready, and then we'll go from there. But yeah, if you want to just continue thinking and planning and like getting ready to work on your novel in the future, then it could be useful for that too.
Sure. And I shared my loglines.
Okay.
And you asked about things getting in the way. It's just too many projects and life and bees in my brain.
Bees in the brain, not the bees. Okay. Well, thank you for the update. Hopefully you'll clear some of those bees out of there. The bees in your bonnet, perhaps?
Perhaps.
Perchance. Anyone else? Feel free to tell us about your book. What are you writing? What are you hoping to write? What's getting in the way? Carmen, go ahead. Your mic looks like it's muted, Carmen.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I hope everyone is doing really well. I do want to write some things. I want to finish 1,000 Years, and I think I have been having a block for a long time now on that project. I think I was trying to like deny that I have a block, and I think it just, well, I mean, I know that I have talked about how the screenwriting gets in the way of writing other things. So I hate having all these unfinished books laying around, so to speak. So I do want to finish it, but I mostly just want to finish it so I can start a new book that I have in my mind to write. And so I don't know if any of this stuff is going to happen. I mean, I feel like, yeah, I should be able to make it happen, but I kind of can't really do a lot of things right now. And I feel like I do have a lot of mental blocks for some reason. It's weird. So yeah, I just want to finish my current project by next week. And I planned on having it done by tomorrow because I think there's a new feature bootcamp starting. So I like to have my project done before starting a new feature bootcamp, but I've had like a lot of challenges lately. So yeah, it's just really hard to do things, and just like basic functioning is like really hard right now. So I'm just trying, just like moment by moment kind of living. So yeah, that's it.
Okay. Anything that you want any advice on or suggestions on, or is it just kind of life getting in the way?
It's the same thing. Besides just like, having to will myself just to even brush my teeth every day. I still have the same issue of preventing going to the pages to finish 1,000 years, which we're so close to finishing it, right? Because I'm really weak, and I think I heard Luke talk about this the other day. The harder scenes, for me, it's the action scenes. And I was reading a script from one of the members yesterday, and I was like really admiring like the action sequences that were really well written, and like to me it seemed really well written. And so yeah, I think that those are the things that are like really hard for me to write. Like like really heated action, I think the first time I ever really experienced those, and when I say the action scenes, I'm talking about like the fight scenes.
Right.
Yeah, I'm talking about the fight scenes. But I think I knew that you knew what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Like I assume you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's fight scenes. Just going through those. I remember in The Widow Slayer how that was the first script I ever wrote with you guys, and so like some of the fight scenes were like kind of weird and awkward, and I had to go through and like really imagine the fight scenes. How like you don't describe every little thing, every little movement in a fight scene, right? It's just kind of like there's some things that are implied on that, and so that was kind of hard for me. And I mean, I obviously have a lot of action and like killing scenes and stuff in a lot of my stuff, but for some reason, like okay, so I think I understand what I'm trying to say. Okay, so when going through the fight scenes, I have a hard time not getting to death. So in order to keep on the tension going for future fight scenes, I think I need to figure out how do I not get to death so quickly, and so that there's going to be that next time, right? Because you have to span it out, especially in a novel. You have to span out those scenes to where it's like, okay, it's like a crescendo, or am I saying that right? Where it's like a building, like you just said something, but I didn't hear you.
Sorry, I think it's like crescendo.
Crescendo, yeah, crescendo. Okay, so am I thinking of it right? It's like I need to be able to to say, okay, this is a fight scene. Okay, yeah, it's pretty heated, but then the next one happens and it's even more heated. And then it gets to the point where it's like, okay, this is a near death situation. And then finally in the end, there's the final, because I know what's going to happen, right? In 1,000 years, I can see it all playing out in my mind, but just getting to the pages of actually writing it is like a real challenge for me. Even though it's like, oh, I need to get to the death. Like, I don't mind getting to the death of things, but I need to do the work that happens before that in this, you know.
Right. So my suggestion for you is, it sounds like if you are just kind of jumping right to the end of the fight scene, or like, how do we keep the fight going if they are just going to obviously die? You have two competent combatants that would kill each other, so why aren't they just dead? Then you probably need to be adding other objectives to your action-based scenes beyond just kill the enemy. And that's why you can think of so many great action-adventure type stories, like think of Indiana Jones or something like this, where the goal isn't necessarily always just kill every bad guy on the other side. It's going to be, you know, get the locket. Everyone's trying to get the same thing. And like pulp action-adventure stories have a ton of scenes like this. Everyone's trying to get the same thing, right? Or you could do scenes where we're trying to get the thing away from the bad guys, or one of them is chasing the other one, or you're chasing them, or they're chasing you. That gives you like other clear things or other objectives to work towards, and other signs of progress beyond just how many of the opponents are still alive. So I would kind of broadly categorize action scenes into like different types of physical goals or challenges. You can kind of sort them into the big categories of attack, defend, and move. So basically, we are being on the offense, taking the fight to the enemy. We are on the defense, meaning the enemy is attacking or chasing us. Or the move would be we have to just get someone or something from one place to another place. And then maybe you can add an extra one, which would be like acquire or something like that. We're trying to get a thing. And with just those 4 types of objectives alone, you can really mix up the types of action scenes and make sure that we're doing more than just always, going head-to-head and shooting until one person falls down. Does that make sense?
Yes, and actually, you're really making me think now, because one thing that is missing from a scene, of struggles between a series of struggles between what's his name, Mally Grayson, my character, and the demon. I can't even remember the demon's name right now. So, okay, so what I'm missing from their struggle in these scenes is the one object that is the object.
You're talking about like a MacGuffin? Are you still there, Carmen? Can you guys still hear me? Is it my connection that dropped, or is it hers? She dropped. Okay, Carmen, we can't hear you at the moment. Feel free to hop back in if you can, but it sounds like what you might need for your story is some kind of MacGuffin. It sounded like you were saying, which would be like a thing, like an added extra sort of object or objective for your characters to be pursuing. Really, really useful plot device in adventure stories. Okay, hop back on whenever you are able to, Carmen. I'll leave you on the stage there for the moment. Okay, so it sounds like we have folks at all different sorts of stages. Anyone can also feel free to speak up and weigh in the chat and tell us, where are you in your book? Where are you in the outlining? I hope that you're all satisfied with your outlines and ready to move forward, because we're starting pages today and hoping to finish in 90 days, meaning that we're going to be writing about 1,000 words a day. And if you are writing an adult length book at 90,000 words, 1,000 words a day would get you obviously a book in 90 days with no days off and with no breaks and no leeway for, falling behind. You don't have to stick exactly to that, and also many book lengths are going to be shorter than 90,000, especially if you're going to be writing for younger age categories. Like, if you're writing in middle grade or young adult, then 90 is kind of on the higher end. You typically don't want to quite go to 90,000 words. But in any case, we already talked about in the previous week's word counts and genre expectations. We discussed it all to death. So now we're just in the phase of executing the pages. In this overview of today's course, I'm going to show you what we'll be doing. We're going to be looking at log lines and doing any last review of outline material if you want to share that. Obviously, the shorter and more condensed you can make it, the better. It's going to take a long time to look through a really detailed treatment or a set of scene cards or something like that. But if you have some question about something you're working on, today is a good time to just get that question answered, get unstuck, and get a strong start. We will talk a little bit about opening hooks and conflict. We will be reading opening pages of books around us, so grab a book nearby if you want to do that. And we'll talk a little bit about first pages in different genres and different ways that we start stories of different genres and the ways that we hook those different types of readers. And I often have a little time for write the opening paragraph in class today. We usually don't get to that exercise, so we'll see, but in any case, the option is there. Okay, or if you want to get feedback on your first page or first paragraph, you could also share that today if you want. So, post whatever it is that you want feedback on in the chats, and we will take a look as they come up. Tag me, make sure to tag me by typing the @ sign and my name. Recap of the suggestions for ground rules. Ideally, you're ready to start pages right now. I would get used to the idea of sharing early work if you want feedback as you go. If you don't care about feedback as you go, you're in a good spot, and that's totally fine. You do not have to get feedback on unfinished work. We will ask that you use a real name if you're going to stick around in the class beyond today. So you don't have to do this today, but for the previous or for the next classes in the course, make sure you do change that screen name to a real name. Okay, so we talked about word counts already. I'm not going to belabor it, so I'll just leave this up for a second so you can be reminded. The average length for an adult book is going to be in that 90 to 100 range. The other age groups, young adult, middle grade chapter books, are all going to be less than that. Thrillers are going to be on the faster side. Stories where we spend a long time with world building, like historical and fantasy and things like and science fiction and things like this, will err on the longer side. So you can figure out your daily word count goal if you just type your target word count into a calculator and divide it by the number of days, so divide it by 90, and that's how many words roughly that you want to be writing per day. So a page, we don't really talk in page counts, we're only talking word counts. A single-spaced page is about 500 to 600 words of text. Okay, so in terms of opening hooks, let's talk about what we're doing in these first pages. And in just a minute, we're going to actually just grab a book off a shelf and ask who would like to just read it out, and we will analyze the techniques that they're using. So, opening hook, what actually happens? Is it a scene? Is it narration alone? There's lots of different ways to start a story. We can start with your character in direct address, in this kind of epistolary style, where it seems that they are talking to the reader, although often in those cases it's them talking to somebody that exists in their world. If it's just them generally talking to the reader, then we have to ask, who do they think the reader is, right? We're establishing point of view and perspective in our first pages in such a way that we're trying to get into your character's head very quickly and understand whose perspective we're telling the story from and what is unique about their voice. So we're trying to kind of showcase the way that they think, approach situations, and solve problems, which is why even in books, like this is a screenwriting suggestion for the most part, but opening with a scene where your character attempts to solve a problem and then it resolves in an unusual and interesting way is often just a great idea. It's a very valid way to start a book. There's lots of other ways to start books too. You can start a book talking about the state of the world, and there's a lot of very overdone and cliched ways to do this, you know, and there's a lot of brilliant ways to do this as well. Think of it was the best of times, it was the worst of times kind of opening to Tale of Two Cities or things like this, where we start by talking about the setting more broadly. That works a lot better if you're in that omniscient point of view, which means that you're sort of speaking as a storyteller type character, and that storyteller type character could be you, essentially, and then you are basically picking what's important and what to showcase to the audience. Whereas if we're in third person limited, you're going to want to start probably in a scene with the or at least with the character talking from their perspective and from their opinion about the world that they're in. You want to avoid these kind of cliches of waking up in the morning and having them look in the mirror and describe themselves kind of thing. Or there's also another really big cliche, which is it starts with them describing a photograph, which is almost the same as the mirror thing, or it like accomplishes that exact same goal. And they'll be like, you know, I look at the old picture of me and mom and dad all together, and my brown hair cascading over my shoulders and things like this. And that's just kind of like it feels a little like overdone as a way to start off a story. So probably don't start with your character describing themselves unless there's some really unique perspective or way that you can like thing that you can bring to that. But don't just begin with like, I'm 5 feet 8 inches tall and I was born John, I was born this sounds like a autobiography, doesn't it? I was born John D. Rockefeller in April 6th, 1982. 1892. So, you don't want to have a dry opening. You want to have something that grabs attention and sort of invites a question or poses some kind of little puzzle, or it starts to build a mystery, or it's just something that we want to know what it means, or what could that possibly mean in that context. Those can make really good opening hooks. We're setting expectations and promises right away, and we're also establishing what is the tone and voice of this kind of story, so that we're making sure the audience sort of realizes the ride that they're in line for. I'm not going to pick this as my opening just because it's so graphic, but I've read a horror book called The Troop by Nick Cutter recently, which is a very gory horror story about Boy Scouts being attacked by mutant tapeworms, basically. And the opening page is following the last victim of the tapeworms as he takes his boat across the water trying to escape from the authorities. And it describes in detail the parasites in his body that he feels like moving through him and stuff like that. And it's very, very gross. And I was at first I was like, you really want to do that on the first page? And then it kind of made sense why. You read the book and you're like, oh no, it's full of stuff like this. If you can't handle this opening page, you're definitely not going to be able to handle the rest of the book. So that's not to say that you have to overwhelm the reader with the most extreme version of the thing they're supposed to feel right away. But it is to say that you want to tell them what kind of experience they're going to get with this, and sort of act as that, like, you must be this tall to ride kind of bar. Like, that sense of, you want to give a preview as to the emotional experience that this will entail. So make sure that you are just setting out that, like, it doesn't mean you have to give the game away instantly. It doesn't mean that you have to always reveal something that you want to hold back as a mystery for later in the story. But it is a good place just to make sure that the readers get like a jolt of that intended emotion. So if you're writing a horror story, start with something scary. If you're writing a humor story, then start with something funny. Just to make sure that we understand that by reading it, we're going to continue to get more of that. You don't want to miscalibrate or misalign your readers' expectations right away. And if you do want to you're writing a horror story or something like this and it opens in this idyllic meadow or something like that, you can give us little clues in the text as to the tone, like you can describe the tulips, in that red as if they've been drenched in blood or something like that. Like, you don't have, that's a little silly, but you can see at least how you want to tell us what we're about to read or what we are reading. So these are all things that we're going to try our best to assess, and we'll look at the opening hooks, meaning we'll look at that very first few page and the very first few sentences and whether or not it demands to be read. It asks a question that we want to answer by continuing to read. Things can be interesting in lots of different ways. This is a non-visual medium, so we don't have to start on an explosion, but sort of like questions are almost like the book version of starting on the explosion, because questions almost demand to be answered. And asking interesting questions in your opening page is going to be one of the best ways to keep readers turning that page. So we want to pull in the right kind of readers, set those expectations in terms of voice and tone, emotionality, and the type of genre thrills that they're going to get from this particular story. You can also see why so many stories that are going to have a comedic or like a high concept comedy type of premise. You think of all the movies that open like characters in the middle of a ridiculous situation. They run out of a mattress store covered in cake, and they're like being chased by a bunch of security guards, and they're like, freeze frame. Okay, I bet you're wondering how I got into this situation, aren't you? Let's wind it back. We do the record scratch sound as we rewind time, and we see, that's me, total slacker, nothing going on, right? Like, okay, I'm pitching you the worst like mid-90s comedy of all time. But you can see kind of why we do that. It's to give a sense of where it's going, the sense of what the tone and voice and the type of humor is going to be. Like, if you keep watching, eventually, even, what is it? Wolf of Wall Street even does this, doesn't it? Where it's like, there's going to be wacky, zany stuff later. Check this out. Here's a little bit of it. Okay, now you got to wait. And we're going to earn that by watching how that came to pass, watching the dominoes fall that lead us up to that situation. You don't have to do this type of intro, and in fact, there's like, more in books there are more elegant ways to do this rather than here's a cool thing, now let's rewind. But you can do that in very clever ways. You can start a story something like, the summer that I died was like, and it was a warm one. It rained on Sunday, or it rained on every Sunday, and it was warm during the days, and the hot air attracted these little bugs that stuck to your skin, stuff like that. And we're like, wait, did you say the summer that I died? And that kind of does do that little it's not even foreshadowing. It's just telling us where the story is going but in a way that feels very organic and natural and invites the question of, wait, why did they mention that? Like, how is that going to come to pass? Why is the character being so casual about it? All those things might be sort of reasons to keep reading. Different ways that you can hook people in that first few lines and in that first page. So you can start by describing something unique and noteworthy about the setting or the time. That can make a nice opening hook. It was the best of times, the worst of times. That whole paragraph actually goes on to draw a lot of interesting contrasts where we say it was a time of decadence and it was a time of poverty. He was sort of describing the city in its two different, or the culture, the society, in its extremes and contradictions, which sort of says that the book will be about the balance between those things, or the, finding the path that leads between decadence and poverty, or that leads us to, we're trying to find the right way to live in a world where there are extremely rich and extremely poor, for instance. And we can kind of use those ideas at the beginning to create its own little kind of conflict or tension. Like the fact that we're contrasting two different things does come with that sense of call and response, question and answer. It was the best in this way, but here's how it was the worst. It is an intriguing way to build out that opening paragraph of an omniscient style book. That doesn't always work if you're writing. If you're writing in a character voice, you'd have to have a character that had a reason to view things that way. But that can be a very nice way to characterize somebody, is the way that they describe the world and the way that they talk about their life. What else? We can talk about a character. Something interesting about a character, or about the character themselves if they're writing in first, or if they're speaking that first person voice. So, the samurai died, things like that. Or you can mention, give us a little clue as to their personality. If your first line is something like, I don't think anyone's listened to me a day in my life. It's kind of interesting. It's drawing us in a little bit. No one's ever listened to you. I wonder why. Who are you? Are you a prisoner? Are you the abandoned stepchild? Like, we're kind of drawn in by a problem or by a conflict right away. So starting with some sort of point of contention, or something that's wrong in the character's life or in the world, or something that they're noting needs to be fixed, some issue, some point of pain in the world, can be just a great way to start. Typically, you don't want to start with really flat, even intros that are like, everything was fine. The grass in the fields, the farmers in their, the pastoral kind of openings where we're just describing the day-to-day life on a farm for a while, can be tough to draw people in with nowadays, although if you go back, you will find a lot of intros like that from older books. And just the way that we have told stories in different genres over time has changed, meaning that the things that would hook readers in the past are not always the same exact things that would hook us now, just as our sense of attention span and genre expectations and things like this are changing. Lastly, you can, or not lastly, this is just some examples, this is not a comprehensive list. You can open in medias res, or you can raise a question. What's the opening line of the Charlotte's Web? Where's Papa going with that axe? So we're starting in the middle of a scene with a character asking a question that immediately demands a response. Papa is going somewhere mysterious with an axe. Now we have to know. We have to turn the page and find out why. And then you can, this is another example, this famous one from, I think it's from, is it called 1,000 Years of Solitude? Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Orlando Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. Sort of setting up quite a lot. This one is one of the more complex opening sentences, in that it sort of establishes several different timelines at once. If your book has complicated timelines, then it can be useful to teach us how the chronology is going to work early on. You don't really have to do that, though. I would be careful with kind of mixing up the tenses like this, but it's done very well here. You're really offering a promise to the reader, an interesting piece of insight or information, something like that you will unspool if they continue reading. You're trying to introduce your most compelling characters. Sometimes that can work well by showcasing their unique perspective, tactics, or voice. Try to paint a picture in your reader's mind that fills them with questions that they will feel compelled to answer. And also just be showcasing your unique writing style from the get-go. We want to know, what is the voice that is this going to be, a very snarky, jokey kind of voice that's always breaking the fourth wall and interacting with the reader? Is this going to be a very grave and serious voice, like we are, very elegiac, like we're reading a Ron Hansen book? Or is this going to be really fast-paced and flippant? Is this going to be, we're trying to assess what the emotional kind of mood that we are in. Okay, let's grab a book and raise a hand and read it out for us. Luke, go ahead. And let's be asking these questions. What techniques is the author using to keep us reading? What promises and expectations are being established?
All right, just the first paragraph or so. All right. Hold on, having technical difficulties.
With a paper book?
It's a
Or is it
an image
Oh, an image.
from a paper book
Okay.
that I had loaded, but now is unloaded. Hold on.
Okay.
Why does Discord have so many issues lately?
I don't know, man. It's been a nightmare for me.
Okay. 1. Describe using diagrams, where appropriate, the exact circumstances leading to your death. Saunders had been dead for almost 2 weeks now, and so far he hadn't enjoyed a minute of it. What he wasn't enjoying at this particular moment was having to wade through the morass of forms and legal papers he'd been sent to complete by the Department of Death and Deceased's Rights. It was all very well receiving a 5-page booklet entitled Your Own Death and How to Cope with It. It was all very well attending counseling sessions with the ship's metaphysical psychiatrist and being told about the nature of being and non-being and some other gunk about this guy who was in a cave, but he didn't know it was a cave until he left. The thing was, Saunders was an engineer, not a philosopher, and the way he saw it, you were either dead or you were alive, and if you were dead, you shouldn't be forced to fill in endless, incomprehensible forms and other related nonsensica. You shouldn't have to return your birth certificate to have it invalidated. You shouldn't have to send off your completed death certificate, accompanied by a passport-sized photograph of your corpse, signed on the back by your coroner. When you're dead, you should be dead. The bastard should leave you alone. If Saunders could have picked something up, he would have picked something up and hurled it across the gray metal room, but he couldn't. Saunders was a hologram. He was just a computer-generated simulation of his former self. He couldn't actually touch anything except for his own hologrammatic body. He was a phantom made of light, a software ghost. Quite honestly, he'd had enough.
Wow. That was so funny. What was that from?
This is Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers by Grant Naylor, a Red Dwarf novel. So
Wow.
there you go.
Okay. So, really playful, funny tone. Set off right off the bat. What was the first sentence again?
Describe using diagrams where appropriate the exact circumstances leading to your death.
Oh, is that a quote or something? Is that in quotation marks?
It's like in all capitals. It's like instructions.
Oh, it's instructions. Okay, what was the second line then?
Saunders had been dead for almost 2 weeks now, and so far he hadn't enjoyed a minute of it.
Right. So right off the bat, kind of a joke. Like a funny line to start off the story and give us that kind of irreverent... It felt a lot like a sort of Beetlejuice type of world until you got to the hologram part. But at the very least, we get the sense of what the topic of the story will sort of revolve around. Like this idea of, life going on after death and being this bureaucratic nightmare that we sort of see in some... Or also, what's the one it reminds me? Grim Fandango, I guess, is sort of the other one it reminds me of to some extent. But the minutia of having your birth certificate invalidated and all that kind of stuff does set up right off the bat this kind of subversive, like darkly comedic kind of voice here. What else do we notice here? Feel free to answer, Luke, or anyone else in the room. Weigh in the chat. Let's answer some of these questions.
Let me look at the question. Well, it raises questions about life and death. We already talked about expectations and promises, tone and voice.
Let's go to conflicts. There's a strong conflict here.
Well, he's had enough.
Yeah.
He's very irritated that he has to do all this crap after he's dead.
Yeah, he doesn't like the system. The system's it's boring and annoying to be dead. He wants to go to the next thing, it sounds like. And so that tells us right away that this story might revolve around this character struggling against that, like the ghostly, the dead people hologram bureaucracy, trying to change that, or at least addressing a problem that is caused directly by that. Maybe you can tell us what's the plot of the book, or just summarize what it's about.
It's not actually about Saunders. This is a little bit of an isolated like story as a cold open.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, the cold open is about Saunders, but the rest of the book is actually about Lister and Rimmer. Rimmer's a hologram. This whole thing is basically just introducing us to the concept of holograms, and then to the ship, and it's a lot. Like, it goes through sort of several episodes of the show, and I don't really think it is structured like a traditional novel because of that.
Okay. Interesting.
It sort of expands on like things that they couldn't film, things that there's just no budget for, and like questions a viewer may have about how it all works off of what we see on the show.
Wow. Okay. I did not expect that, but yeah, there is this whole subgenre of tie-in fiction that is going to be linked to video games, TV shows, board games, Broadway plays. Anything else can have like fiction novelizations that expand upon it, that are going to fit within that world and kind of be like professional fan fiction in a way.
Yeah, that's written by the showrunners. So.
Oh, it's not even fan fiction if it's written by the showrunners then.
Yeah, it's official fan fiction. It's just expanding on what you see on the show.
Right. Not a super common genre to see nowadays, but this was very common in this sort of Star Trek kind of world of shows.
This is a very Star Trek kind of show, so it makes sense.
Right. Doctor Who, I'm sure, also had like hundreds of books probably.
Oh, I bet you'd get buried in them if you owned them all.
And role-playing games too. There's role-playing games of basically every old 80s and 90s TV show.
I love these little in-jokes. Like, there's this thing about, some gunk about this guy who was in a cave but didn't know it was a cave until he left.
Yeah,
that's, every first-year philosophy student has heard Plato's cave allegory, and it's just funny to see it phrased that way.
Yeah, it kind of has that Douglas Adams sort of little asides and references and jokes in the text.
Yeah, lots of that stuff.
All right.
And
thanks
just lots of absurdism as well, like the passport-sized photograph of your corpse signed on the back by your coroner.
Right.
Yeah. Just so specific to be whimsical.
Right. Yeah, whimsical, funny, humorous. This is not going to be... I'm not getting the sense that this is going to be a really heavy story.
Definitely not. People die as a punchline in Red Dwarf, so...
Yeah, sounds like it. Thanks so much for sharing that. Let's ask somebody else. Come on up, read your page, and answer these questions. What happens? What's the conflict? What questions are raised? What expectations are set? What kind of experience does it seem that we are in for?
Hello. All right. Let us begin.
Dakota, go ahead.
The driver of the wagon, swaying through forest and swamp of the Ohio wilderness, was a ragged girl of 14. Her mother they had buried near the Monongahela. The girl herself had heaped with torn sods the grave beside the river of the beautiful name. Her father lay shrinking with fever on the floor of the wagon box, and about him played her brothers and sisters, dirty brats, tattered brats, hilarious brats. She halted at the fork in the grassy road, and the sick man quavered, "Emmy, you best turn down toward Cincinnati. If we could find your Uncle Ed, I guess he'd take us in." "Nobody ain't gonna take us in," she said. "We're going on just as long as we can, going west. There's a whole lot of new things I aim to be seeing." She cooked the supper, she put the children to bed, and sat by the fire alone. That was the great-grandmother of Martin Aerosmith. Cross-legged in the examining chair of Doc Vickerson's office, a boy was reading Gray's Anatomy. His name was Martin Aerosmith of Elk Mills in the state of Wacanomic. There was a suspicion in Elk Mills now, in 1897, a dowdy red brick village smelling of apples, that this brown leather adjustable seat, which Doc Vickerson used for minor operations, for the infrequent pulling of teeth, and for highly frequent naps, had begun life as a barber's chair. There was also a belief that its proprietor must once have been called Dr. Vickerson, but for years he had only been called the Doc, and he was scruffier and much less digestible than the chair.
Okay, thanks for
That's
that.
the first page.
Wow, there's a lot there. That was
Right?
several scenes. Let's go through them. Tell us what were there was like 3 distinct scenes, I think. Can you tell us what they were?
Yeah, sure. So the first one, this girl is pulling a cart. They're going westward from Ohio. And she's clearly in charge of everything, in charge of the family, and her father is sick. We learn who this person is in relation to our main character, who is Martin Aerosmith. And, we jump forward in time significantly to, Martin Aerosmith is, reading this book, Grey's Anatomy, and this doctor's office in Elk Mills in around 1897, so turn of the century kind of stuff.
And they were coming from a funeral at the beginning, right?
Yes, they were. Yes, it was a funeral. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. So this is a completely different tone from the book we just read. This is the opposite. This to me sounds like this is going to be a very reflective and somber and serious tone. Does that sound right?
Yes, it is. This is Sinclair Lewis's Aerosmith. I read from the first edition, actually.
Great.
I'm very lucky to have that copy.
Nice. Yeah, it must be an old one.
It's very old.
So this is, I guess it's historical fiction for us. But was this contemporary? When was this written in the 1890s?
This was written in 1925.
Oh, okay. So it was historical fiction for them as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right,
Yes.
Right. Okay, great. So yeah, serious, reflective historical fiction where we're going to be moving through, I'm guessing, a significant amount of the characters' lives. The characters growing up and getting older over the course of the story, as these, historical fiction often does do that. What kind of expectations or promises are we setting up here?
So notice that this character is in a doctor's office, and so there's a lot of questions about the doctor, right? Our main character ultimately becomes a doctor. He's reading Grey's Anatomy. That's a very well-known academic text. So he's a very smart kid already if he's reading Grey's Anatomy.
If he's reading it all in that time,
right? Exactly.
Especially reading a medical textbook.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's definitely going to be a drama involving this guy as he grows up in the medical field.
Right. Exactly. So we're sort of setting up the motivation for the main character in a way. Even in this first page, we start coming from a death and then go into him studying medicine, or like clearly having that interest in studying medicine. So it's setting up the trajectory of the character right away.
Absolutely.
Anything else you notice here, or anything else you want to remark on?
The only thing I'd like to say is this was a Pulitzer Prize winner. This won the Pulitzer Prize in 1925. Sinclair Lewis, this is considered his best work. So if you haven't read it, give it a read. It's really, really good.
Thanks for that. Was the name was Aerosmith?
Yes, Aerosmith. One word.
Okay.
Aerosmith.
Not the band. The Pulitzer-winning novel. Thank you for that. I see 2 more hands raised. We'll start with, I see Becky, and I think the second one, I can't see the full username, but I think it might be Jaime. Go ahead, Becky.
Okay, so Chapter 1, Boy. He waited, hidden by dusk and the garden bushes against the bark of an oak tree, watching. The spot gave him full view of the house and gravel driveway. Worrying about being seen felt weird. Perfect had been alive with the news of Dr. Eugene Brown's arrival for weeks. The doctor would help. Boy knew it, more than he'd ever known anything. He just had to get to the man before he changed. As night closed in, George and Edward Archer strode by and mounted the stone steps to the house. The place lit up, and Boy watched them move around inside. Suddenly, light darted across the grass by his feet, and Boy pulled back further into the shadows. A silver car crunched along the driveway towards him and stopped. His heartbeat quickened. The engine purred to silence. The large door of the house opened, and the Archer twins stood silhouetted in the light from the hallway. As Boy watched, still as a statue, a shiver danced down his spine. A man got out of the driver's seat, a woman from the passenger side. He hadn't imagined the doctor would have company. The woman looked nervous, staring across the roof of the car at the man.
Okay, that's the end there.
Handshake. The woman followed, and the four of them disappeared inside. Boy ventured a little out of the shadows, stopping short as the doctor called, "Violet, come in from the car, pet. It's chilly out there." The back door of the car opened a little, then quickly slammed shut as a breeze rustled the leaves behind him. The boy held his breath and pulled back into hiding. The car door swung open again, and this time a small frightened girl dashed out across the gravel towards the house. Boy couldn't help laughing. She sped up, jumped the steps, and rushed in through the front door, banging it shut behind her and plunging the yard back into darkness. The car door hung open, and Boy pushed it shut as he edged closer to the kitchen window. He just caught sight of the girl sliding into the room. He sat down by the steps to wait. Night rolled on. The watchers would be patrolling soon, and he couldn't be caught outside the wall again. He'd come back in the morning, early, and speak to the doctor then. He took one last look at the window. The girl sat between her mum and dad, a proper family. Something inside him stung as he thumbed the rub-worn note in his pocket.
All right, thank you for that. Was that all one page?
Technically, it was a page and a half.
Page and a half. Okay, so was it the first chapter?
Yes.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. So a little longer than the first page, but basically, like, has a self-contained kind of nature to it. Like, that sort of page-long first chapter hook is kind of like a common thing that we see in both adult thriller and also middle grade and YA nowadays. And I'm guessing from the voice and the tone here, this is middle grade mystery thriller.
Yes, and it's also the only chapter that we get from Boy's perspective.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's like a cold open.
Yeah, from then on, it's from Violet's perspective.
Interesting. Okay. So it raises lots of questions. Lots of interesting questions right away. First of all, who names a boy boy, right? Like, that's one. Go ahead.
Yeah. And he mentions Perfect. The book is called A Place Called Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, and so that's always going to be a really nice way to kind of... It's almost like the capital letter thing is almost like a cheat code for world building hooks in the first page, because it's like, oh, I can never leave perfect, or, you know, the watchers might get me, something like that. Capital W, watchers, what does that mean? You know, clearly that's a thing that exists in this. A capital letter is kind of a clue for a world building element that you can use to build intrigue right away. It's overdone a little bit, but you can see why it's so effective. What other questions are being raised, Becky?
Well, this was the reason I picked this book up, and it's amazing. For me, it was why is he so desperate for this doctor, and what can the doctor fix? Mm-hmm. And why was he surprised that there's someone else? But it also was like gave a little bit of his personality with his laughing at this really nervous girl going in who's the same age as him, you know, sort of. And the line, worrying about being seen felt weird.
Right. That to me was what clued me into the very middle grade kind of voice, because that's the kind of line that I guess that feels like a very middle grade kind of thing to say or think. You know what I mean? Just saying something was weird right off the bat. Whereas if it was an adult tone, I think it would probably use different terms there. What do you think?
Weird is a kiddie voice. Well, kiddie voice, a teen, tween voice.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly.
It's like saying, Summers were, her brothers were so gross. Like, describing something as gross or weird without any further nuance, something about that just like feels like it fits in that perspective. Maybe that's a bad example, but the fact that it just used very simple language all throughout to also clued me into the fact that this is a middle grade story beyond just the age of the character. We have a little tension here. We're building a lot of questions, and there's suspense why is he watching from the shadows? What's wrong with this kid? Are questions that we might wonder right off the bat. What else do you notice? Go ahead.
We actually meet the villains right from the outset. George and Edward Archer strode by and mounted the stone steps to the house. That immediately gives us this, like, they've got power feeling,
Right.
the way they strode by. And then he refers to them as the twins. So it's very, it's a meeting the villains right from the start.
Yeah, it sounds like this is sort of a snapshot of all of the main characters, right? If there's
Yeah.
the boy, the girl, and the two villains.
Yes.
So within that first chapter, within that opening page, it's like a preview of everyone that we're going to get to meet.
Yeah. All of the characters that matter, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's sort of what we're doing. I mentioned earlier. Go ahead.
And the other bit was his when you mentioned the Watchers. So you mentioned the Watchers. This was a bit that intrigued me. Was when it was the Watchers were patrolling, and he couldn't be caught outside the walls again, not inside the walls. Like, you'd think, he couldn't be caught inside the walls of the town. No, he couldn't be caught outside the walls. So where is he being held? That means that him going into perfect means he's outside the walls.
Right. Makes us wonder, is there something dangerous in this town that they're walled in to protect them from, or are they prisoners there?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Thank you for that. What was the title one more time? Place Called Perfect by who?
Place Called Perfect by Helena Dugan.
Helena Dugan.
Is, as you can tell by the fact it's a mam and pa, you can tell that it's Northern England. But I definitely recommend, for anyone who's interested in how to do spooky middle grade, creepy middle grade, this is a creepy book.
Definitely has that Coraline kind of uncanny vibe to it.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I see one more hand raised, so we'll do one more. Come on up on the stage.
Hello, Connor.
Hi, is it Jaime?
Yes, it is.
It is. Welcome back, Jaime. What have you... Well, don't tell us the book. I guess you'll just read it out, and then we'll try to guess, and we'll try to answer these questions here.
Okay. He drank alone, which was odd since he didn't have trouble with people. He had always managed to make acquaintances without much effort, and despite what had happened, he still liked people. Recently, he had even grown to miss them again, yet here he was, drinking alone. Maybe I'm just shy, he thought to himself, and then laughed at such a feeble attempt at self-delusion, for he knew what it was. From his place at the end of the long bar, he examined the others in the crowded lounge. He recognized a handful from training. Training it was where it had begun, where he had felt that odd sensation descending upon him like mist, separating him from all those thousands of others around him in the mess hall. It was a dull kind of temporal shock at first, a reaction reverberating from somewhere deep within him. He had somehow felt, no, he had somehow known that they all would die. He shook his head, drained his glass. If he was in the mood for honesty, he would have to admit that his chances were no better at all. That's it.
All right. Thanks for that. So we have some mysteries, some questions being raised. We have a tone being set right off the bat. This sounds to me like military fiction, perhaps? Is this adult military fiction? What's the genre here?
That's a good guess. It's military science fiction.
Oh, sci-fi. Okay, interesting. So yeah, the fact that we're in a mess hall and that you have this character that feels like a kind of grizzled soldier who's been through something, that kind of gave me that sense.
Yes.
What about the what tone are we setting right away?
I'm trying to think of the tone. I think more like mood for me. I think of mood. I like the setting of the mood, and I this is going to be something serious. People are going to die. He's alone, so I like that. I like that there's something special about him. The training set him apart. So I don't know if I'm answering the question in terms of tone, but I just get this serious mood, this seriousness of story.
Tone and mood are definitely very linked together. This feels like a very sort of somber and serious kind of story with a gruff main character that also has a reflective side to him. It sounds like he has been, perhaps traumatized by some event that he mentions here, some terrible thing that happened or that he saw that has affected him really deeply. And so all of that, does build that very sort of, serious, mournful, grave kind of mood and tone. Anything else that you notice? Any expectations or promises that are being set up here, or anything else you want to remark upon, Jaime?
Yeah, these are good questions. It gets me thinking. This is like the opening of, I'm going to say the book and the author.
Yeah, go ahead. What's the book?
Okay, so the book is called Armor, just Armor, by John Steakley, and it's basically about a scientist who is like, there was this ant war in the past. There was the humans call it an ant war, but you had two different types of soldiers. You had the scout armor and the heavy infantry armor. And this is about the story of the scout. And the scientist is given this scout armor, and embedded in the armor is the guy's memory. Not only his memory, but what he went through, emotional memory. So the scientist hooks it up for like maybe 5 minutes. He hooks it up himself up to experience what this soldier went through. And he almost gets a heart attack. He can't take it. So he enlists a group of people to help share the load, because what this guy went through was so horrific. Whatever this guy went through, it's too much for a human being to handle. And so they have to share the load. And we kind of go through the story of this scout, what he went through the eyes of these scientists. So, and then there's two stories in one that coincide in the end, which is great. It's one of my favorite novels. It's the best science fiction novel I've ever read, but it's one of the best novels I've read, period. But the questions that are raised, or I wouldn't say expectations or promises. I would say hopes. Like I want to know what happened to him. Why is he alone? He tends to like people, but he's drinking alone for a certain reason. And then it says, for he knew what it was. I hope to find out what that is. Right. And also, like he just knows that everyone's going to die, and he probably is going to die too. And so I kind of want to know, like, he's already setting things up. And what is it about this training? When he started the training, it even separated him even more from everybody else. And we do find out why he is a special kind of scout. But there's more to him than meets the eye. He's not just a soldier. He's something else. He's running from something. And so he escaped to this war. And so we find all that out. That all comes out in the novel. But anyways, that's kind of what comes up for me, so.
Great. That sounds like an interesting premise, interesting way to kind of write an allegory for PTSD and trauma and explore that through a sci-fi perspective. Can you give us the name and the author one more time?
John Steakley.
Steakley, got it. And the title was Armor.
Armor.
Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. Let's keep going. So we talked about opening hooks. We're looking at these ways that we're building these expectations in just these first few pages. The questions that you're at, like in all of those, there were interesting questions. And remember that the opening questions are one of the best ways to sort of provide that hook for the reader, because it's like one of the best reasons to turn the page, to find something out, to read for information. Once you've settled into a scene, the way that scenes often work, just to recap the very basics of scenes, somebody wants something, they try to get it using interesting tactics appropriate for that character, they struggle with obstacles in attempting to get that thing, they will succeed or fail, and this changes something overall for the story, and it's going to take them closer to or further from their larger goal. That's going to be a conflict scene. Not every single story, not every single scene is going to be a conflict scene in a book. There's different types of scenes, and I think especially in the one that Dakota read from, we could see scenes that are not based on conflict right away. We're in discovery scenes where we're sort of learning about the world and the characters, and we're moving from conflict scene to conflict scene. We're sort of floating between them. The reader's often reading for conflict. You don't always have to open on something, some really clear, one person's trying to get one thing, another person's trying to get a different thing. That sort of like movie scene style conflict. You don't always have to open on that. But there's different types of conflicts. A contradiction, this best of times, worst of times thing, or something that doesn't seem to make sense right away, is often a handy method of hooking people in that first sentence. What's this book by? This is Red Sister. When killing a nun, it is important to bring an army of appropriate size. Such a great, hooky, interesting opening line that makes you go, oh wait, what are nuns in this world? Why would you need an army to kill a nun? And a nun must mean something that I don't know what it is, and it must be some sort of incredibly badass warrior, because who can fight a whole army? So that immediately, it's not saying a character wants something, this character wants another thing, but it does create a point of tension, and this sense of something that needs to be resolved. And that's how that's like a different way to look at conflict in a book. It's not always going to be based on characters, but like there's this kind of inherent tension with us just simply wanting, the audience wants to know something, is a fantastic way to draw the reader through the story. Floating. Okay, so in a movie or TV show, we're always in a scene, except if we're in like an establishing shot or something like that, or like sometimes a quick, maybe you might look at like a transition between scenes might not necessarily be a scene. But for the most part, we are in a scene. Everything we're seeing is a scene. And so we have mostly like 90% conflict scenes, 90 to 95% conflict scenes in movies and shows. In books, we have to kind of connect the dots between scenes in a unique way. I call it floating, where we're going to be moving from scene to scene in terms of we might be moving time forward and saying that many years passed between this and this part and the next part. And we might talk about the change of the seasons and, the buildings becoming covered in ivy over time, the bricks starting to crumble. Things like that might act as that larger... I guess I would say that in books, a transition is much more fluid and a much more substantial than it would be in a movie, where it's like you just kind of fade from one image of the house from the house in the summer to the house in the winter. Whereas in the book version of that, you might really have to get close in on the details and talk about, the weeds begin to split through the cracks and the wasp nest formed, the wasps built their nest on the attic gables, or you might be picking really specific details to focus on that a movie wouldn't catch, including stuff that's going to be imperceptible in a movie or show. You can talk about feelings and emotions and bigger ideas. And if you're writing something like literary, this can be the meat of your story. It can be as you connect us between these longer moments. Sometimes that can have just as much meaning as the scenes themselves. I'm not gonna pick this example. I had a better example that I gave in the previous weeks, which was how we floated down to the opening scene of Half a King by Joe Abercrombie. I really liked how that one kind of starts with a description of the outside, the world that we're in. The howling wind as it whistles through the cracks of every building and chills everyone to the bone. And then it sort of ends our first major paragraph on, and it talks about the fire casts its flickering light out onto the room and the hanging herbs and onto the gnarled root that the woman held up in her fingers. And then she immediately asks a question about it. So we sort of like end up landing in a scene almost without realizing it, or without. It feels like an invisible way to kind of like drift. It's like we're craning down in terms of cinematography from up above to down below until we land on a character. And now we're looking at them, and now we're in that moment with those characters. So that can be a great way to kind of float down to a scene. You can think of it in terms of changing from more broader or bigger to more specific and smaller details. In terms of like if we start talking about the world, then you start talking about one country, then you start talking about one house, then one room, then one guy in that room. That's like that equivalent again of zooming down through the clouds and finding your subject. It's like binoculars or telescope that you're turning the focus as you're like finding that interesting thing to zero in on. And you can use that idea to give just enough setup before we then settle into that interesting moment or scene. You typically don't want to go like a couple pages of just setup and ideas and theoretical stuff and backstory and world building at the very beginning. Nowadays, It's usually better to get to a scene pretty quickly. There are exceptions to that, and there are a lot of successful novels that have taken a long time to get to a proper scene. So don't take that as a hard and fast rule, but typically readers are looking for scenes. We're reading for characters. Like when you're writing in commercial fiction, we are looking for a character that is pursuing a longer term goal, that has interesting tactics that they pursue in an attempt to accomplish that goal, that is then going to be complicated by increasingly difficult obstacles that are going to culminate in some sort of great loss or moment where it seems their goal is impossible. They're going to have to dig themselves out of that hole and change as a person, or not change if it's a tragedy, as they attempt to solve that problem one more time, and they settle into that new sort of status quo. That's like the general trajectory of the entire story, and in these opening pages as we settle down into scenes, it can be helpful to give us that initial sense of what that trajectory will be. We talked already about that, the boy reading the anatomy textbook in the doctor's office, sort of building that expectation right off the bat, oh, this is something this character cares about. It's the first moment that we really focus in on him and we see him doing something that fundamentally represents kind of who he is and what he wants. So we're trying to learn who the characters are, what they want, what they're missing, what they've been denied, and where it is they're going, or where they want to go at least. Often where they think they're going is completely different from where they're really going, and what they want is different from what they need. That's often where you'll find the theme of a story. I think I'm not going to read all of these. Which one do I want to look at? Let's maybe look at Slaughterhouse 5. Because I think last time we read through these, nobody chose that one for some reason when we were picking which ones to read from, so let's look at that now. So this is a sci-fi war book, I guess, from the 60s or 70s? 69. When a young American soldier is kidnapped by aliens, they unstick him from the flow of time, allowing him to catapult through his life and explore his experience before, during, and after World War II. If you didn't know that's what that was about, that is actually how crazy this story is. So we have a kind of semi-autobiographical aspect too, where the author, Kurt Vonnegut himself, is weaving his own experience sort of in the story, like he's kind of a character in his own story to some extent, or the main character might sort of represent him. We have a comment from Twitch, from Petra Anne Marie, who says, just passing by for support. Good luck with today's load of work, and don't forget to visit sometime too. Thanks for coming by. I don't know where we would visit. Let us know if you have somewhere that you'd like us to visit, but thanks for the comment. Thanks for watching. So we are going to look at the opening page of Slaughterhouse 5 here. Let's again focus on these questions of what is the tone, what are the expectations that we're setting in place already. What are we learning about the world and about this story from just this opening page? Okay, I'll just read this one. All this happened, more or less. The war parts, anyway, are pretty much true. One guy I knew really was shot in Dresden for taking a teapot that wasn't his. Another guy I knew really did threaten to have his personal enemies killed by hired gunmen after the war, and so on. I've changed all the names. I really did go back to Dresden with Guggenheim money, God love it, in 1967. It looked a lot like Dayton, Ohio, more open spaces than Dayton has. There must be tons of human bone meal in the ground. I went back there with an old war buddy, Bernard V. O'Hare, and we made friends with the taxi driver who took us to the slaughterhouse where we'd been locked up at night as prisoners of war. His name was Gerhard Muller. He told me he was a prisoner of the Americans for a while. We asked him how it was to live under communism, and he said it was terrible at first because everybody had to work so hard, and because there wasn't much shelter or food or clothing, but things were much better now. He had a pleasant little apartment, and his daughter was getting an excellent education. His mother was incinerated in the Dresden firestorms. So it goes. Okay. Complex and nuanced tone here. What are we learning from this? What expectations are we setting up? Anyone can feel free to weigh in the text or raise a hand and speak aloud. Dakota, go ahead. I get the feeling Dakota might have read this one before.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Hi, yes, go ahead.
I love this book.
This is a high school book for a lot of schools as well, so I think a lot of kids read this, but don't always appreciate it fully.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I've definitely read this after high school for sure. The thing that I love about what this sets up is the tone is that Vonnegut employs. it's almost like could kind of think of this as a little bit of satire in a way.
Yeah.
Where, it's very much like, oh, like he's just kind of casual, like, this is what it is. And yeah, it just is how it is. And he is very direct in, like, it looks like Dayton, but with more holes in it, spaces in it, which is like, okay, what does that say about Dayton?
Yeah. He's kind of plain spoken and straightforward, even though
Right.
there's a lot of ideas under the surface, but the language is pretty simple.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very easy to understand. Like, the comparisons are great. It's very, it's engaging because we understand like what he's talking about. He's not beating around any bushes at all. He's very, it's about this thing.
And laying all his cards on the table in terms of the truth or the veracity of the story too.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like pretty much true. Like, what does pretty much true mean? Either it is or it isn't. Like, that's how truth is. Like, there is no such thing as just pretty much true. Like, it's either it is true or it isn't true. So, what's true? So, I love how this book opens with pretty much true.
Yeah. It's sort of telling us that he's gonna make some stuff up because that's the only way to tell the truth.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And also, I've changed all the names. Like, I love that.
For liability reasons, maybe, or to
Yeah.
preserve the identities of those involved.
Sure, yeah, protect the innocent, things like that too. Also, for sure.
And so this is, in terms of the mood, it's an interesting combination of things. It's like kind of lighthearted and glib,
Yeah,
and it's kind of really reflective and serious. What do you think?
yeah, it is. Like it's very much, like a reflective piece because he was, in Dresden. Like that actually is a real thing that happened to him. So it is reflective in terms of his. It's kind of like this is his way of like I often compare this to The Hobbit or to Fellowship of the Ring because Tolkien was reflecting on World War One. Well, he's reflecting on World War Two here.
Right.
So it kind of has that vibe of just inner reflection through a fictional story, and he's
Yes.
kind of going through like he's kind of coping with a lot of things that he's dealing with
Did you
here
read
in this book.
The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien? That's kind of the Vietnam version of this.
Yes, exactly. Great book, fantastic.
I think every war has like one or two definitive, like reflective works like this. In
Yeah.
terms of World War One, it would be All Quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Anything else you want to point out about this?
Yeah, I mean, the Dresden firestorm just, I mean, if you know about what happened in Dresden, that is just heartbreaking, 3 words. It's just, I mean, it kind of hints at the brutality of what's going on. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. I love Vonnegut, so if you haven't read this in a while, please read it again, everybody. It is great.
It goes by
His work is
so
awesome.
quick. You read it in one day. Easy.
Yeah, right. There's also a museum in Indianapolis that's really good too.
That's based on this book, or that's based on Dresden?
That's based on it's a Kurt Vonnegut museum.
Oh,
It's the
Vonnegut.
Kurt Vonnegut Museum. Yeah, it's in Indianapolis. It's really cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Last thing I'll point out is we also start to see a little bit of the conflicts of the turmoil that the main character's in right away too. It's kind of subtle, but we see the kind of guilt that he feels in relation to the war.
Yeah.
He talks about how he went back to Dresden with Guggenheim money. God love it. He's talking about like, I'm so lucky as to have money to be able to be privileged enough to be able to go back and do these and examine it like this and to walk on the same ground that was burned all these years ago. When so many don't have that kind of privilege, that's kind of like at the core of this book too, is his guilt over having survived.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is very much a survivor's guilt kind of thing as well. So yeah, this is a really good examination and good reflection of what he was going through in a way, even though it is, fiction. It is autobiographical in the sense of like how he went about doing it.
Right, right. And it's got weird sci-fi stuff too. I mean, he gets kidnapped by aliens and put in an alien zoo and forced to like get it on with a supermodel, I believe. And they are studying him like a zoo animal. So yeah, weird sci-fi mixed in with the historical stuff. Thank you for your thoughts, Dakota. Okay, so hope this is making sense. What we're doing with first pages, with first paragraphs, how we are setting up all the things that will matter in the story moving forward. The journey that the main character is setting out on, or we could be really emphasizing how they are at the start of the journey and kind of showcasing how they might need to change, or what it is that they've been denied, what it is that they would aspire to. The opening page of Red Rising is a lot like that. It's sort of just like I've only read the first chapter of Red Rising, but it's very much like, they destroyed my family, they took everything from me, and now I'll do anything to take them down. That sort of like preview of like a revenge quest. You get a very driven kind of main character that is leading this revolution kind of thing. There's other good examples here. We won't read them at the moment, but have gone over them in previous classes. This is always a nice one. On the second day, things did not get better. Starting with an and. Unusual, but it does give you that idea of characters that we're joining in the middle of characters that have been on a journey or on a trip. Gives us that sense of the kind of being lost in that, or being stuck in the wilderness alongside them. Like we already feel like we've been here for a while. Okay, anybody want to post your opening paragraph or opening page for feedback? Or you can say it's not ready for feedback if you just want to share. Becky, go ahead.
I just got to find it on my iPad. So I just got to quickly go over to it on my computer.
Okay. This is a free public class too. Are you sure you can share this?
Yeah, the first chapter's fine.
Okay. Sounds good.
But if anyone else wants to go while I'm trying to find it.
Okay.
Okay.
I see another hand raised. Go ahead.
Close the door behind you, please. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
This is what, the opening, like, paragraph?
Yeah, opening paragraph sounds fine.
All right. I might do 2. So, he wasn't suicidal. He simply wouldn't mind dying. Guilt and shame was his norm. But instead of weakening him, these two emotions empowered him. They both provided a capacity for great pain and extreme violence. He could bathe in blood and suffer no psychological damage. Nothing in his adult life could traumatize him. Nothing compared to what he went through as a child. He was broken inside, and he knew this deeply. A wounded warrior, a wounded killer. As a child, he lived in constant fear. The only way he knew how to overcome this fear was to own it, master it, become it. And he grew to be a threat to everyone around him. He didn't mean to, but that was the cost. His presence alone triggered the primal instinct of survival in each person within his vicinity. Fight, flight, or freeze. Some men, uncomfortable with feeling intimidated by him, challenged him to their own detriment. Others left the room while the rest attempted to submit. He hated these male social dynamics, so he became a lone wolf, minimizing contact with others. Stop there.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. So what I'm getting from the tone and the expectations from this is going to be a grim, action-based story, maybe a revenge story or something along those lines. I get the feeling it's definitely very adult and is going to, we even have the words extreme violence in those first few sentences. So this is going to be an action thriller. Is that right?
Oh, yes. Yes.
All right. And also, no jokes, no humor to be found here. Is this pretty dead serious through and through?
No, there'll be at least one character who brings some comedic element to allow the audience or allow the reader to breathe.
I see.
So yeah. So there'll be one character at least that will provide that comedic relief. So
okay, maybe some comedic relief here and there, but overall, is the tone very serious?
yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So you pretty much you want to filter out the audience that's not going to want to read this right away. I mean, you're starting off by talking about extreme violence and child abuse in the opening paragraph. That sort of is saying, if you're not interested in that, don't read anymore. And overall, just setting that very dark and very oppressive, grim, and violent kind of world that it feels like you're building here.
Yes.
Any questions on this, or anything that you wanted to ask about or get opinions on?
No, I mean, what I just heard right now, I think this is the first time I've read this. This is from I try to write a series for the Night Fighter, but I might write it in novel form. So this is for the Night Fighter story.
Night Fighter. Okay.
The Night Fighter.
Right.
So this is the prologue for the Night Fighter.
Great.
But no questions or anything. I'm glad that I was able to set the mood and the tone. And you're right, it does weed out. People who, may not. This may not be their cup of tea.
Right.
And if you want to read something really dark, because some people think they write dark, and I'm like, okay, buddy, let's see how dark you get. I mean, but you read my, this is simple. This is easy to write, actually, but this is what I want to write, but anyways, no questions.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's from the Night Fighter by Jaime. Let's see. I see Luke. Go ahead, Luke. Not getting audio for some reason.
There we go.
There it is.
Chapter 1. The gravestone withered in the sun. For 70 years it stood askew, strangled by creeping vegetation. Streaks of mold and bird droppings stained shards of granite. A leather-gloved hand scratched away a half-century of lichen, revealing lines of lettering. The inscription read, Annabelle Elijah Dreyer, Lodris 4, 1601 to Midney 13, 1780. Requiescat in pace. Should I keep going?
Is that the first paragraph, or how much was
That's
that?
the first paragraph-ish.
You can stop there if you want. Can you read the last part again? What were the dates? Where it was like 180 years? Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
It was. Okay, so that was part of the hook. I see. Okay, great. So let's just look at what we established there. So we're starting with a description of a twisted grave, which starts us off in this very sort of gothic kind of tone and feel to this story. I would guess right away this would be probably horror, or at least supernatural thriller set in the past. Do I have that right?
Gothic horror.
Got
it right.
Okay, great. Is this the vampire one, the Moons Over Mayhem?
Yep.
It is. Okay. So what else? It's very screenplay-like, I will say. It feels like it's written in that kind of almost cinematic tone. Was that on purpose?
A little bit. I mean, it gets more close when we meet Charlotte. We meet her like right after that line, and then we get sort of close on her.
Okay.
And
it's fine to do. Like, you can write in cinematic POV. You don't see it very much, but like especially that idea of like a hand enters. It felt like a hand enters the frame to like rub the dust off the grave, and then we, the camera, see what it says underneath.
I know. I'm a visual thinker. I've always written like that, even when I'm doing like short stories and stuff.
You can do it, and also you sort of earn points for doing it sometimes, because a lot of stories are not that like it's harder to picture what we're looking at. So you will get the comment that your writing is very visual when you kind of frame it in these ways. What can I ask? What is the Are we in third limited, or what is it omniscient?
It's sort of like floating, and then we go to third,
Okay,
close third.
So you start in omniscient, then you zoom down, and you center in on a character. I see. A lot of fantasy books do that too.
Not sure I'll do the whole thing like that, but this is how I wrote it ages ago.
I think is it Wheel of Time, or is it a different fantasy series? I think it starts every chapter with a little bit of omniscient, and then we zoom down to the characters. So there's definitely ways to do that. What else? What about the tone and the mood? So I got gothic horror from this, maybe mystery, and again that sense of seriousness and gravity. This didn't feel like a funny or humorous story. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, and there is something quite serious sort of happening in it's life and death. Like we don't get it till the end of the chapter. It's a very short chapter, but we establish in her carriage at the tomb there she's concealing these 2 child-sized coffins in her carriage. And she's very sort of, we can tell she's worried about it.
Right. And then ending your paragraph on the dates on the grave sort of tells us that we're in the world of probably the supernatural, if there's people that on the gravestone that you said the dates were like from 1601 to 1780 or something like that. So
180 years, and it had been there for 70 years.
Right.
So
something speculative is clearly part of this story, unless there's just like a weird mistake on the grave or something like that. But you're hinting to us that there will be something supernatural here, right?
I would like to think so.
Mm-hmm. Not even hinting, just.
And also sort of twisting
it, but it is heavily foreshadowing a supernatural zombies, vampires, something like that.
And sort of twisting the dates on the calendar. They're not Earth dates.
What were the months again?
So, Lotris and Midna.
Okay, I couldn't quite hear those very clearly when you read it, but yeah, that's telling us that we're not quite on Earth then, probably, or at least not on any Earth that we recognize. Thanks for sharing that.
Welcome.
Any other questions on that, or things you wanted to ask about?
Things I want to ask about it. I mean, not really. I guess, should I start more close third if I'm going to do the whole book like that?
You don't need to.
I don't know.
It's up to you. It's just, I would maybe be consistent about it if that's how you sort of see the camera, like the rules of the camera sort of working, or not the camera, the rules of the perspective working, that you can go into omniscient in certain moments, but mostly will be connected to the characters. I think it works fine, especially if we start out and then sort of drift down or crane down to join them and get in their heads. So yeah, no, it doesn't.
And as long as I'm not like head hopping a lot or hopefully at all in a single chapter.
Yeah, exactly. That's the convention nowadays. But I mentioned The Troop earlier, and that's a very popular, well-known book. There's like more head hopping than you'd think, even in published books nowadays. But generally, the suggestion is to steer away from that and just be in one POV per chapter most of the time. Thanks for sharing.
Can I read the next one just to see if this is overwritten for her description?
The next paragraph? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Charlotte Deacon, the alchemist, contemplated the epitaph. One slender arm cupped a hat to her chest. Yellow hair fell down in straight lines past the gentlewoman's shoulders. Across her nose balanced a pair of silver bifocals, underlined by bruised lower eyelids and 2 ice blue irises, or punctuated by 2 ice blue irises. Sorry.
Okay. Wait, you want to stop there?
That's it. That was just her description.
Great. So it was a nice physical description. I'm just kind of wondering why we mentioned she's an alchemist here. She's not doing any alchemy things, and I'm just wondering why even you described her in that kind of, using that as context.
I'm not sure. I think it's, since we go back in time from here, I think it might be important to tell the audience that what she does, or I don't know, rather than just sort of show her like mixing potions or drinking potions or something.
Rather than just tell us she's an alchemist, can you describe like the chemical burns on her hands or something like that, and use that to like link it to?
Yeah, I mean, I describe the like blast apron she wears and the heavy gloves and the chemicals clinking in her pouches and all the like alchemy stuff on the carriage.
Then
So yeah, I
wouldn't
guess I
even-
can.
Then yeah, I don't think you even need to start out by just saying just the word alchemist in her description. Almost is too distracting. I would say if you're going to
Okay.
go on to layer in all these physical ways of showing who she is in the scene to follow, then I don't think you need it at the beginning.
All right. Thanks for that.
Sure. Nice job. And yeah, so yeah, look for those little beyond just the clothes that she's wearing and the external physical stuff. Also, I would say to think of all the things in the character's body and the ways that you can describe them. I was mentioning like the burns that they might have, the scars, the creases from, if you have a character that has like a face that's creased from laughing too much or things like that. That just tells us a lot about them. So I would look at all the physical body language, posture, things like that can be helpful for characterization as well.
All right.
Thanks for sharing.
She's like a blonde Edgar Allan Poe.
Cool. All right, blonde Edgar Allan Poe. Like that's how I see myself. Becky, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Oh, I should say I got my piece up.
Oh, great. Okay. Let's go ahead with that one now. And Mario has Mario has one as well. We'll finish with Mario today, I think. So go ahead, Becky.
Maddie was used to seeing ghosts, but she'd never seen any this old nor this ugly. The ghosts of California didn't look anything like these apparitions. These had sickly grey skin and oozing lumps covered their body, diseased.
Nice. Okay, that's the whole paragraph.
That's the first paragraph.
All right, so this feels like we're setting up a horror story. I mean, mentioning people covered in sores, like dying of diseases and stuff in the opening paragraph, kind of sets us up the expectation. This is going to involve creepiness. So I think that's coming through well. She's seeing older ghosts. I guess you're saying that where she was from. Oh, okay, so I get it. These are like victims of the plague and things like that, where she is now.
Yeah.
I see.
In the next paragraph, I mentioned London, so.
Right. So where she's from, if she's American, then we definitely have had pandemics and things like that in the past, but we just wouldn't have as many ghosts because we haven't had as tightly concentrated of a population for as long a time. Are you saying that all of them have that, and they all have that kind of gross look to them, or is it just like there's a preponderance of there's like more of those than usual?
I think she in my head, she went past an area that was like, because in London they'd sort of put them into areas and then like blocked off the houses. So you'd end up, I guess, getting clusters of them.
Clusters of them. Okay, so at like the hospitals and things like that?
Yeah, well, yeah, it wasn't that nice back then. It was more just, you got the plague, we'll lock you in your house.
Right, for sure. So maybe, I guess, yeah, they would just be everywhere in that case. We often don't think of, like, how many ghosts would there be? There'd almost be, you wouldn't be able to even see from all the ghosts in certain places, right? Like, they'd just be everywhere. So we're raising some interesting questions. The question of who is this girl that's used to seeing ghosts? Why can she do that? Why, if this is very normal to her, I guess she's been seeing them her whole life. So it's raising these questions that we want to know more about the character. The tone feels middle grade in terms of the word choice, similar to the place called Perfect One. You just describing them as like old and ugly. Something about that just feels like a middle grade-ish. Something about that just really simple word choice feels like it fits in that world. Any other questions?
Go
ahead.
Oozing lumps. I did have a question for later on. So she mentions that she won't get there in time for supper. She's Californian. Would you call the evening meal supper?
No.
Or would you call it dinner?
We would never say supper.
Well, what would you call it?
Dinner. Yeah, we got breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I originally did dinner, and then I looked it up, and it said, California, they say supper, and this is a formal meal. And I'm like, it doesn't sound right.
Yeah, bro, we gotta get back to the surf shack for supper, bro. Like, what are you talking about? Come on. No, we never say supper. To us, supper is like a joke that we're like, oh, I need to go for supper with daddy and mummy. Like that sort of thing. We don't have any concept of what that really is.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure. That's why people really come to my classes, for the impressions, right? It's for the impressions. Mario, did you want to read your opening hook? I see Megan's raised a hand, but I don't see a hand raised from Mario. There we go.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you fine. Go right ahead.
Okay. So I don't use names, right? For now, right? So I'm just gonna do some code names, right? Ra was dead, senseless. The fool wanted to prove himself. He knew enough to know that the war was fast closing. Of the 5 kingdoms, only B remained, and he wanted to receive their surrender and join the pantheon of my most prized generals. He wanted to be awarded a tiny, useless ribbon by his father. Instead, E received a different sort of string. He was captured, found guilty of being my son, then strung up by his neck and armpits and hoisted onto C's highest parapet. He was only 24. A few months later, the war ended. Death is the greatest comedy, after all. Such a lovely, lovely quote. I don't think such thoughts, usually. My pursuits are less intellectual. My bookshelves are filled with treatises on trebuchets and accounting ledgers. My father, bless his soul, was more the scholar. See his work over there? I look to the large scroll to the side, to the west wing, and nod. Right before he died, and then he continues, right? Right before he died, after he told me to unite the kingdom, he had given me a long laugh, told me to fetch a scroll. He drew the words for me with great big letters. His death note was what I was thinking about when the messenger came in, handing me a scroll detailing my eldest son's death. I laughed long, laughed hard.
He laughed long and laughed hard. Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Was that the... Oh, sorry. Did I cut you off? Was that the end of the hook?
Yeah. I mean, that's the end. There's more about it, where there's silence. Like, let's just go to the next silence. That way, it's like a thing. E was always an impatient boy. He would steal pies before they were fully cooled. He was quick too. As a boy, he would compete in the races and win. Always so quick, too quick. And then there's a silence, and then there's more stuff. That's kind of like the beginning.
When you say there's a silence, what do you mean by that? Like this is all like in dialogue, like the character is
So
monologuing.
basically, there's a person, like, he's talking, right? And then I look to the large scroll, and then the narrator, or me, comes in and says, "Oh, there's a silence here," as the emperor collects himself. I do not interrupt. He takes a drink of tea and spits it onto the ground before continuing. I needed to go to that part so that you understand, like, the setup.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So we have a storyteller character that's relating the events of that we're following in the book. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. All right.
There's more, but like, I think that's good enough to get the sense of what I'm going for.
Yeah. So we're getting the idea that we are going to be sort of in this storytelling mode where we have a first-person narrator that's going to be relating their experience. In this case, it seems like he's telling a story about his son. Is that right?
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay. And at the beginning, we get the sense that you said the kid died, and then he received news of it and was laughing at it, or he was like happy to learn the son had died. Did I interpret that correctly?
No, I think I did the reverse emotion thing.
Oh.
Where he just laughed.
Oh, meaning it was like overwhelming to him, and it was actually sad.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, so this is the story of how the son came to die, though. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have kind of the trajectory that the character is going to go on. It's sort of this is like it's a very old technique, storytelling technique, where we're like, I'm going to tell you the story of how blank happened. And then you go into the specifics of it. Think of like the old epic poems would often start with something kind of like this, where it's like, this is the story of how Odysseus conquered the Trojans, whatever it was. And then we go into the specifics of how that happened and how that came to pass. So that opening couple sentences is like a preview.
I think it's like really immersive, and it's so old it's new again is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it feels sort of mythological, or has that kind of like medieval chronicler kind of vibe to it. At first, I was going to guess this was a wuxia Chinese setting. It is. Okay.
It is. That's why they wrote, like, the quote is written is drawn in a scroll. Mm-hmm. So that's like a kind of like a promise, a hint on what it is.
Right. The fact that you mentioned the 5 kingdoms was what tipped me off. Maybe not every reader would know that was indicating this was a Chinese focused story, but like
Well, there's 3 kingdoms and there's 7 kingdoms, so I just picked 5.
Right. It's the but there's a famous Chinese saga called Romance of the Five Kingdoms. Isn't that it?
3. It's
Or is
3.
it 3? Oh well, never mind. How did I?
That's why I picked 5.
How did I get the wrong number?
That's why I
But
picked
still
5.
got the right vibe. Yeah, I don't get it. But
Yeah,
okay.
that's why I picked 5, just so people get the gist. But I'm not. It's not. So they don't think it's Romance of the 3 Kingdoms. They get the feel.
I
of
somehow
the
thought it
kingdoms.
was anyway, but I guess maybe
Good, good. You're supposed to get
I
that
picked it
vibe.
up. Right. Exactly. So is this a kung fu story?
It's a low magic martial arts story. The magic is so low, it's almost non-existent.
Right. Okay. So yeah, wuxia, kung fu, the world of like martial arts are their own sort of form of like magic in a way. And this is going to be an epic war based or epic sort of like feudal era conflict type of story, probably adventure.
It's
fantasy
after the
stuff.
war, so it's after the war. So
it's
it's like
after
the
war.
aftermath. So I don't want to explain the full war, but the aftermath war is a simpler story since it's only it's only a 50,000, 60,000 word story. So it's the aftermath of the the world is conquered, but there's still like political problems. It's a smaller story, you can tell.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I do get the sense though, because we're in the sort of martial arts genre, the conflict is not over yet, and there will be violence yet to come.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing this one. We do have to wrap up. I see Megan says she has one as well, but we are just in our last couple minutes, so we do have to wrap up. Sorry about that. Come back next week. So hopefully we've gained a pretty good understanding of the stuff that we're trying to do in our opening hook, opening page, opening paragraphs. Just to kind of recap, let's look at the main stuff that we talked about here. So we are trying to raise a conflict or a point of suspense or tension. We're asking questions that the reader will be invited to keep reading to find out the answers to these interesting questions, these mysteries that are going to be the point of turning the page. We're setting expectations and promises and calibrating those expectations in terms of what the reader is in for and what kind of story that it seems like they are going to be getting into. We're trying to filter out the readers that will not be interested in this kind of thing. We're setting up the tone and the voice and the sense of character perspective. So if this is being told in a certain mode or a certain way, we need to kind of come to grasp that within those first few paragraphs. Unless there's some big twist later that we realize who was actually telling the story or something like that, which can be a big part of certain series reveals, like the 5th season series by N.K. Jemisin, which has a big mystery as to who certain narrators actually are. We're also establishing the uniqueness of your writing style and just the word choice, vocabulary, what kind of age group are we in, should be typically pretty clear within those first couple paragraphs or pages as well. So like most of the time we were able to determine today if something was middle grade or adult. We didn't hear any YA ones today, actually, I don't think, but they were, just the word choice alone can clarify for you who is the readership intended to be for this. So all those things together, those are all what we're trying to do on our opening page, focusing on setting, time, character, question, in medias res, or these interesting contradictory statements that lead to these mysteries that we will ultimately want to resolve. Okay, so plenty of ways to hook the reader and bring them into the story. Let's look at everything coming up. Reminder that this is the last free class in this series. We've done so many free novel classes here. We're ready to move ahead in our boot camp. So the next 90 days will be focused on taking you from beginning to complete draft of that book. Next week we're looking at point of view and emotional impacts. We have upcoming screenwriting classes, Sundays 11 to 1, feature boot camp. Those first 2 weeks will be open to the public and free, June 16th, so tomorrow, and also June 30th from 11 to 1 p.m. or 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Script Camp. And that will be running in that time slot for 8 weeks up until August 11th. TV Bootcamp already started. We did our free classes there, so you can catch up and join if you want to participate. That's going to be Friday 6 to 8. And you can sign up again at scriptcamp.net to get unlimited membership and access to every class on every server, including WordCamp, including ScriptCamp, and including all these other great topics as well. Over 100 hours of classes every month, access to video library with every recording, consultations and proofreading discounts, coins that you can spend on readings every month, exclusive member channels, and much more. So please sign up if this was interesting to you. You want to keep writing the book, learning about writing in different forms. Screenwriting, TV writing, and novel writing are our biggest topics on our biggest servers. So we hope to see you guys for the rest of these. And also check out our weekly events. Later today at 7 p.m., Writer's Voice is our reading series. And also we have a lab today for members from 4 to 6, so come back with your questions, topics, and up to 5 pages of work for feedback. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you soon at your next script camp class or event, or WordCamp class.